All right, we're going to get started in just a second here. Alrighty. Alrighty. Hello everyone. Yeah, if you're in the chat, feel free to say hey. Sometimes it's hard to tell how many people are in here, but yeah. Today we're going to be drawing in charcoal, and I'm going to be showing a technique or a process that I've been practicing, and I'll kind of walk through the materials, and we're going to be doing some kind of rendering of the Queen, a paper mache mask model matriarch created by Noel Rhodes. So yeah, let me just get a couple things in order and we'll start. Okay. And yeah, we got some nice piano music from Gaia going on. So we'll kind of zone into this here. Okay, so yeah, basically, the idea working with this process that I'll be showing is to kind of achieve a high contrast image. So let me turn this down a little. So yeah, we're going to be working with a couple things. This is something called a Conte crayon, and it's basically some sort of soft charcoal with a little bit of wax in it. There's vine charcoal here, which is this stick, which is, maybe I can show over here, really kind of loose, powdery charcoal pigment, which can be, manipulated and scrubbed and erased into really easily. So it's this very malleable, chalky, pastel-y sort of medium. And, unlike working with a pencil or something with a more defined tip, which produces more of a line, when we're working with charcoal, this really kind of broad drawing instrument, it tends to be a little bit more dealing with massing or shapes. So yeah, if anyone watching this has hung around and drawn along in the last few sessions of this art workshop, massing or working with primarily large shapes as opposed to lines is something that I think should be kind of familiar. And yeah, because the charcoal is so rich and covers, puts down so much tone in just a very little effort, it's a very painterly exercise. So even though we're not working with a brush and oils or acrylic or watercolor or whatever, because we're dealing with lights and darks so heavily, right, and because it has this tendency to kind of make these broad massed shapes as opposed to working with kind of outlines and whatnot, it has a very painterly sort of feel, or it's an exercise, which is a way to practice sort of painting concepts without actually painting. Okay, so yeah, to go over the materials once more, we have this Conte crayon. I've got a sanding pad. So this helps to sort of create some powdery pigment, which I'll show how to use. And then we'll be using a blending stump. So this is kind of a rolled, compressed piece of paper, which is pretty neat. You can use it with a graphite pencil and whatever to just smooth or smudge things out and create gradations. You can also, kind of dip it into some of this charcoal to draw with it, which I'll be showing. So it's, again, kind of a cool instrument because basically we can create sort of thin and thicker marks just with how we, move the instrument around. So that's one thing you can always try. And yeah, last week Mavis showed us some calligraphy techniques. And using this kind of chisel point was a big part of that. And for my eraser, I've got this gummy eraser or a kneaded eraser. It's this really cool thing. You can kind of shape it, and it sort of cleans itself in a way as you mush it around. So you can stretch it and manipulate it into certain shapes to be really specific with how you erase, and also kind of paint with the eraser in a way by subtracting some of these tones. And then what else? I've got this Mars eraser, so any kind of normal eraser. It's kind of cool if you have like a box cutter or an X-Acto blade or something. You can actually chop this at different angles. And if we see over here, you can really kind of carve out harder edges with the eraser too. So that's kind of nice to have. And yeah, if you're working with one of these that's like really ancient, or some of those strange pink pearl erasers that have managed to, remain in your supply box from like the first grade, they can kind of stain your paper sometimes. Just like, you try to erase and it makes the paper pink, or it stains it in some way, and that can be unfortunate. So yeah, you can try this out first, kind of like I'm doing, before you jump in. And I think that's about it. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be sort of sanding, or I'm going to be sanding down this Conte stick on the sanding pad or on the side of the paper, so you don't really need much in the way of sharpeners for this way of working. And yeah, if anyone's watching this and working along with graphite or with a more typical kind of pencil, the same concepts can really apply. I just find for, if our goal is to kind of make a high contrast image with lots of lights and shadows and contrast going on, using a tool like this that just sort of gets that tone down there really efficiently is a nice, helpful way to work. And yeah, last kind of note on working with charcoal is, I think because it's so powdery and pastel-like. The amount you can manipulate and smudge. I forgot this, right? The chamois. You can use a chamois or a paper towel, and we're going to be smudging a lot. So that'll be great for creating like atmospheric effects, softer edges, and stuff that's out of focus. And then we can kind of erase back in and draw into that to create more things that are in focus. So yeah, if anyone has any questions or is working with different materials or, painting or whatever and wants to ask any questions, about applying these concepts to that medium, feel free. I'm just going to sort of jump in and start drawing our model here. Who appears to have stopped moving, at least on my end. So let me double check something real quick here. Okay, there we go. Maybe she's just really still. All right, so, how we start is totally subjective. I'm going to kind of mark off the visible space that I have to work with here for this demo. Okay. So yeah, you can, begin with an outline. I'm going to mostly focus on the mask, I think. Maybe a little bit of the body vignetted in there, but, you can do something like that with line. But if you have, some sort of tool like this, it can be really nice to sort of think in terms of these really broad shapes, right? It kind of saves you some time in a way, because you don't have to, draw an outline and then fill it in, but you could just sort of push out the shape with the tone here. So kind of, the beauty of that massing idea. And yeah, as you're working, you can think of things like maybe over here I'll make a couple notes, like a triangle and a square and a circle. So this is something that, is useful sometimes to think about. Like, out of all the weird shapes you can make, in some sense, things are kind of made up of these sort of primitive underlying shapes. For instance, with the head that I drew here, or the shape that I've put in, maybe you could imagine this is some sort of rectangular shape, like that box, just with different proportions. The head is some kind of, sphere or circle. Right, even this little outgrowth of the hair that I'm trying to imply, that's sort of a little triangle. And, I don't know what this is, but, right, or maybe this rectangle gets curved off a little, so it's sort of a box plus, half of a circle. So yeah, that's just another way to kind of begin things, is before delving into light and shadow and details, maybe try defining some kind of silhouette shape that is characteristic of, whomever we are attempting to draw. And I'm gonna... Okay, switch that back on. So yeah, if anyone new is coming in, feel free to say, hey, just working with charcoal. And I'm going to be kind of walking my way through this way of practicing. So yeah, I'm not sure if I want to just draw the mask or some of the puppeteer, the figure. I feel like that's never a bad idea, is to address some of the context, around whatever our focal point is. In this case, I think that context is a little bit of this body. So maybe a little bit of the torso of our puppet operator, and their hand. Maybe a little bit of the hand on the far side could be kind of cool. Sort of get rid of this diagram here. And yeah, that notion of a context or something, you know, if we were drawing, I don't know, a basketball on a field of grass or something, I think, you know, showing a little bit of that grass around the ball, right? So it's sort of cemented and grounded in a bigger world, can go a long way. Or if we were drawing, you know, a full figure standing, and, you know, which you could be doing here too, maybe their shadow or some of those planks of wood that they're standing on, I think that helps kind of, you know, unite our subject matter with, you know, some kind of world instead of just floating there, which could be cool too. All right, so yeah, this is one way of working. You know, it's practically all shape so far. So shape is a two-dimensional concept. That's kind of these guys up here, 2D. Oh, I think my webcam kind of now blocks those shapes. Oops. Maybe I'll move me here and here. Okay. And so yeah, that's sort of a vocab word or concept, you know, two-dimensional shapes, three-dimensional forms. So a form is sort of when we take some of these flat shapes and, you know, imply a volume to them. So instead of this square, you know, maybe it's a cube. Or instead of a circle, maybe I'm going to need some shading or something here, right, to imply that it's round and it's more of a sphere. Or maybe a cylinder. That's another really useful kind of basic three-dimensional volume. Okay. And maybe here we could do like a cone of some sort. So yeah, here are some more basic forms, you know, to kind of you know, so we can take these flat shapes and start, you know, giving them sort of a 3D presence. And yeah, before I go too far into this, I just want to go over one more kind of concept which is helpful to me a lot, which is, maybe I'll do it through here under the invisible chat box. But yeah, something goes from, you know, two flat lines like this into a three-dimensional form, oftentimes by how we close off the end of the shape, right? So in this case, I took these two lines, and here I'm sort of wrapping, you know, some sort of a elliptical line, you know, over here, and then you know, some sort of ellipse here, and now it's closed off. So I think this becomes a very relatable visual phenomenon, right? It kind of resembles maybe a paper towel roll or a rod or I don't know, you know, just some form where we're looking up and we see the underside of it, and then we don't really see the top, right? Or you could draw one like this, where we do see the top and the underside is sort of cut off. Okay, so yeah, I want to go over this because, you know, I think rendering and creating something lifelike or realistic, right? I think we focus on the shading and the details a lot, and those are critical, you know, for it coming together in that way, but form or that feeling of solidity sort of actually comes from an even, you know, further down, more basic level, I think, which is closing off your given shapes so that they become these simple, readable forms. And then we can kind of decorate and embellish those forms and push them even more with, you know, whatever kind of details or light and shadow effects that we want. And yeah, what happens is we tend to kind of add on lots of these details, and those are the juiciest, most fun things. And sometimes this really simple, you know, 3D form conception can get lost, you know, as we are chasing all of that stuff. So yeah, kind of like when I'm just starting something, whether it's like a portrait drawing or a puppet portrait drawing or whatever, I think it's kind of nice to take mental note or even draw off on the side of the paper somewhere some of these little diagrams. Like maybe for this head, you know, I could think about the whole thing as, right, this sort of idea. Right, so I just drew a really simple cylindrical kind of form where I am looking up at the bottom of it and I don't quite see the top. And, you know, I'm doing that because I think, you know, the camera or the yeah, the camera, that we recorded this, the Queen with, we're a little bit looking up, right? We kind of see the underside of the chin area. We don't see that much onto the top of the head, but it is a little bit close. So, yeah, especially when a given pose, has this kind of thing going on where, we're not like on the floor looking up like a worm's eye view or something, and we're not looking way down in a bird's eye view. It's a little bit ambiguous what the perspective is. So sometimes making this call for yourself, like, what, in this drawing, I'm going to take this concept where we're sort of positioned slightly underneath the model looking up, and I'm going to push that. So that can actually kind of be a way to, again, help ground and balance out and enable you to exaggerate and push things because, you've actually made a decision on what is your angle of view for this. And instead of sort of just guessing or changing, or you can end up kind of contradicting yourself by drawing multiple perspectives. So anyways, that's sort of a little note for my future self as I work on this. Okay, so I think, with some of those shape and form and material concepts aside, I'll kind of jump back into working on this. So what I'm going to do is use my sanding pad here and kind of grind down some of this Conte crayon. And yeah, you could do this with a lot of materials. You could do it with any kind of charcoal pencil. You could do it with that vine charcoal I was showing, pit pastel. There's something called alpha color, which is like a black pastel, which works well. Anyways, grounded this down, and then I can actually use my blending stump and kind of dip into that ground pigment. And let's see what happens here. We can just kind of, right, we can start drawing, and it's a really versatile tool because we can also paint with the broadside of the instrument to sort of paint these large swaths of tone too. And yeah, even these parts of the hair, you could also think about the simple shapes. Like this whole massive hair is, it's a complicated shape, but it's also, a third or a half of a circle, right? Or you could see it as some kind of triangle maybe, with the apex or peak of the point, over here, not quite center, but a little bit on the left. And then this is sort of some kind of rectangular shape, maybe, again here, it's a little bit of triangle poking out on the far side. And yeah, gonna work my way down here. So another phenomenon happening with our orientation or angle of view relative to our model is we're sort of seeing it from a 3/4 point of view. So, we're not really facing our model head on. We're kind of over here on, on the left, or I guess on her right side. So one thing that can help understand or, clarify angle in our work is like the notion of a center line. So yeah, if we were drawing a figure, I think that the torso has, oh hey pal, the torso has a lot of indicators of the center line. You could imagine a chest, maybe there's our chest or our pec muscles, or nipples, or the abs, or a belly button, right? There's lots of indicators that sort of imply that center seam running down the figure, and based on where we put that seam, there's some kind of rotation, that's the word, rotation or tilt going on. So yeah, same thing with a head drawing or a puppet face drawing, That's just something to be careful about, is we can put in an eye here, maybe blocking it in, referring to kind of a triangular or circular or whatever kind of shape. And then just making sure that, we put this one around here, and then that other one is going to be kind of way over on the far side, and it's foreshortened, or it's getting really kind of visually diminished in its dimensions, because it's on that far side of the cylinder that is, or on the sphere, that's kind of wrapping around and disappearing a bit. And yeah, again, like, these concepts don't necessarily mean that they're locking you into copying what you're seeing, but they can be used as the basis to sort of exaggerate things further. Like if you wanted to push more of the idea of this 3/4 view, not quite front view, not quite side view thing, maybe we squish or show even less of that far eye and, make this one bigger, and we'll kind of even get that more of a sense that we're, biased over here on this side of it. Okay. And yeah, the relationship between those two eyes can sort of imply a little bit of this center line. And maybe with the nose, sort of this upside down heart shape. But I think a triangle might kind of do for now, just to block it in. You can kind of look down and give it some more space, and looks like there's this lip form. And yeah, the lips, they're a little complicated. I think I kind of enlarged them a little bit more than they are. But, even for that, right, like, I didn't draw a basic lip shape up here, but you could kind of maybe start off with something like, if you kind of squint and look at those lips, maybe there's some sort of M shape. Maybe the lower lip is like a W or something. Right, so kind of relating some of the complex things into more manageable shapes at first can be a way to kind of just, get the ball rolling and get them in there. Yeah, we can kind of see on our model this sort of ellipse or this line, right? It's not really going straight across, but it's also kind of curving up. And that is nice because it's really complementing this concept of us perspectively sort of looking up at a cylinder. So again, if we're trying to prove or reinforce this notion of we are, positioned a little bit underneath the model looking up, everything we can sort of stack or include to reinforce that helps. If I sort of see that line or that phenomenon and just, draw a straight line across, that's kind of contradicting that perspective. So all the little shadows and details we're going to get to, even the facial features, we sort of want to, if I erase this, oops. Maybe just, even if it looks, like say it wasn't this form line, but it was a shadow or a design element, maybe Noel had just painted a paint stroke across it and it really did look from our point of view as a flat line, that still might be something worth, cheating up a little bit so that it's another element kind of reinforcing this curvature. Okay. So anyways, yeah, maybe I could kind of take that I could utilize that for these lips a bit more. So I kind of drew this straight across. Maybe, I want to try practicing what I'm talking about here. So maybe I do that top lip like that, but then instead of this line being straight, maybe I just warp it so it's also kind of got, repeating that curve. Things like that are going to accumulate and, overall sort of build up to create that perspective effect. And then another cool thing I think happening here is, I don't know how cool it is, but maybe worth mentioning, right? The lips actually have a form of their own. They're not just painted on there. And if you look, carefully, you can really see it in the pose of the model now. They are kind of interrupting or breaking over this contour of the cylinder of the head. So maybe that's worth over-exaggerating just slightly. So I can really see that they are a separate form in front of that cylindrical part of the head. And then we've got this sort of coming down here. So yeah, these are, I haven't really gotten into any shading or light. These are all kind of more fundamental linear concepts, so-called linear concepts, right? Just how the lines and shapes are working for clarity and perspective and all that. And yeah, I think what tends to happen is as we get into the more fun stuff with light and shadow, we can only think about so much at once, so some of that, it probably might stiffen up or get more, less clear the longer I work, so having it start off, as simple and powerful as possible is not a bad way to try. Okay. Cool. And having said that, I think at some point I like to just, get in there and start playing around. So this mark that I made, I'm exaggerating a little bit from what I see, but it's called a core shadow or a form shadow. Those are kind of used interchangeably. And the idea is, maybe I'll show over here real quick. Let's see. I'll just show right over here. Yeah, so when I set up this reference the other day, I try to light it in a certain way, which, is called direct lighting. So direct lighting is a term used for when there's one main light source illuminating a form, and that means that part of it goes into shadow. So basically, yeah, as the planes of this form are kind of turning away around a corner, the light, is hitting from a point, and then the light is falling off as those planes wrap around away from the light source. And then another thing that happens with this, so-called direct lighting is cast shadows. So with that strong primary light source, right, the presence or the fact that this form has some kind of volume means that it also blocks light from getting to other parts of the surroundings. So in this reference, I think you can kind of see on the torso and skirt of our puppeteer, right, there's that sort of really dark, kind of shadowy mask. So that's a shadow from the puppet mask, right? That's light being blocked by the mask. Okay, so that's another way of kind of identifying what the lighting situation is. And yeah, real broadly, there's sort of two lighting situations that, we work with in life and observation. This kind of direct method or phenomenon, and then indirect, which is, let's see, where's a good place to sneak it? Maybe up here. You can kind of imagine a sphere, and instead of that big core shadow or form shadow, it's just sort of ambiently kind of going into darkness. So this is more called indirect lighting or ambient light. And this is something that, actually can be observed, and it happens more on an overcast or a foggy or rainy day, sort of like it is today, at least where I am. Or maybe you're inside a room and there's just sort of light ambiently kind of bouncing around everywhere, and there's not like one big spotlight on it. You might kind of get something a little bit more like this. So yeah, indirect / ambient, direct lighting. Anyways, like all of these, dichotomies, we sort of end up using a little bit of both to kind of render out a form, right? Because this gives us that nice graphic pop, light side, shadow side, high contrast, drama, all of that. But sometimes, like, relying too much on this means that we're relying a little bit more on optical observation or copying. And sometimes our light source, or the way things look in front of us, they might be deceiving, or there might be something that, while it looks great in real life or in this video, it might not translate the same to a different medium. So yeah, just being aware of both of these ways of shading can kind of give you the power to, use whichever suits you, or whichever suits the piece of art you're working on. So sometimes, for instance, the lights, I think that'll be happening in this drawing. If we look at the light side, I haven't really drawn it yet, but on our reference, the light side of the puppet face, it's super blown out. And, you know, again, that could be really cool for a certain kind of image, or maybe it's going to look too flat as just like a white, empty shape. And we might need to utilize some kind of shading to make sure that it feels rounder. So we might use a little bit of the indirect lighting to just kind of put in some tone to turn back that far edge of a cylinder. That kind of makes sense. So, more theory stuff, kind of try to apply some of that here. So yeah, I think I got into that because I was talking about drawing this form shadow. So it's form shadows are characteristically softer edges, right? And that softer edge, or that, you know, more gradual gradation from light into shadow, is happening because it's a curved form, right? It's a cylinder, so it's sort of, the light is hitting it, and the planes are kind of turning away like facets. And as those planes turn, right, it's getting gradually darker. So, you know, that's something that can be fun to kind of exaggerate just for the point of clarity and, you know, aesthetic goodness or whatever. You can just really kind of feather out a form shadow edge, and then maybe for now just fill in the shadow. And yeah, when we were shooting this, there's lots of bounce light coming in, so on the reference just over here on the left side of the mask, you can see this sort of brighter light coming in. So that's something called reflected light. And reflected light can be, you know, erased out. It's sort of light bouncing around in the room. So even though it's called direct lighting, there's usually some other light kind of moving around. And in this case, it'd be bouncing off of this surface and illuminating a little bit of the underside of this sphere. And yeah, a whole, you know, myriad of visual styles can be created based off of, you know, how you kind of downplay or play up this reflected light. On the one hand, it can be a really great tool for keeping the shadows from being too graphic and flat, and showing that, you know what, this sphere is actually curving around so much that it's, you know, picking up light as it's bouncing off of this underside. On the other hand, if we do it too much and really erase, you can kind of see what happens. We're creating, it's still sort of working here, but let's just really overdo it. If I really erase here, I'm making it so bright that we're losing that simple light and dark, you know, contrast. There's an Italian word, a chiaroscuro, I believe, and that's, well, I need to look into it more, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with describing this graphic kind of light and dark, high contrast modality. And a Caravaggio or a Rembrandt or a lot of, you know, realistic image makers, photographers even, you know, kind of rely on this you know, this idea to create their images. So let's see. Oh, good, Elsie. I'm really glad. That's helpful. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free. Let's see. Oh, an echo. Okay, maybe I have like a secret thing going on. I'll look into that in a sec. Let's see. Is the first base shape Conte or charcoal? So yeah, so far I'm only using this Conte crayon. I'll look into the echo in just a sec. I've been I think it's charcoal with a little bit of wax. Like I can just, it's not so brittle like the vine charcoal. The vine charcoal, you know, really comes off like that, and it's super powdery and can almost be erased by smudging it. I think the wax gives the Conte crayon a little bit more staying power, but it still can be ground up pretty well. So yeah, that's all I'm using so far, and probably all I'm gonna use. I'm just grinding it up and applying it with this blending stump. Okay, so let me look into the echo real quick. Hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Crunkle Dealer? Crunkle Killer? What's that? Crinkle Chip? Chunk? What? Crinkle? Well, thank you for subscribing. I'm gonna say something and then let's monitor it real quick and see how it sounds. Okay, so echo test. Well, thank you for subscribing. I'm gonna say something and then let's monitor it real quick and see how it sounds. Okay, so echo test. Well, thank you for subscribing. I'm gonna say something and then monitor it real quick and see how it sounds. Okay, so echo test. Okay, testing. Thank you for subscribing. Okay, so I heard it, and yeah, there's a little bit of. It's kind of. Yeah, so sorry about that. I'm gonna work on this audio setup, but let's just take a second and maybe we can look at some of the really cool images from the last couple weeks. So this was Nick and Pau and Rose and her dad and Jen and Eddie, I think. And that was a couple weeks ago, and then we have last week's with 3 pieces from Jen. Okay, I'm not sure if that's any better. I'm not really sure what the issue is with that echo, so try to work on that for next time. But I think for now I'll just kind of carry on. Okay. Where were we? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I'm in a different. All right, whatever. Who cares? So yeah, talking about reflected light, kind of like a minor thing, but I don't know. I think it's sort of like a rule, but being familiar with the rule can let you kind of manipulate it as you wish. So I think, yeah, sort of objectively from the reference that we're looking at, there's a fair amount of reflected light going on, especially because our puppeteer's shirt is so dark, right? We really kind of see right next to that darkest dark, there's some bounce light in here. So maybe let me reflect that in our piece real quick and just apply some charcoal or Conte crayon. So that's actually a really neat way to still include the phenomenon of reflected light, but kind of do it a little bit more subtly. So yeah, maybe rather than erasing out that stripe of light and potentially succumbing to the issue of losing that nice graphic light and shadow kind of chiaroscuro effect, right? And before I go and dig out pigment, what if I just put a really dark accent next to that area? In other words, sort of what this drop shadow is doing. So maybe if I put that shirt in, and maybe if I darken that core shadow even more than what I'm observing, we're kind of starting to get a little bit of that reflected light. And then I get to kind of be the judge and go, I like it like that, or maybe I still want to erase out even more to really kind of make it more of a profound curvature. So that's, totally up to the individual artist. My bias is I'd like to generally kind of keep it a little bit more subtle, the reflected light, which is kind of funny because in order to make that subtle, I had to kind of really make unsubtle the darkness of the core shadow. So it's all interchanges. But anyways, I really like that old mastery kind of high contrast dramatic image that those flat shadow sides tend to give you. Okay. So yeah, anyways, now that we're getting to a little bit of light and shadow, you can still kind of play around with the under structure in the drawing on a linear level. So one thing I just kind of noticed in the reference is like this hair, it's not just a straight line across. I think when I put it in, I was talking about a simple sort of half circle shape to maybe help get that in there. Now that I look at it, it's a little bit more of like an S curve. And again, I could just copy that S curve because it's beautiful and I want that in the drawing if I want. Or, I could go back and think about my basic forms, like this cylinder perspective that I'm supposedly trying to embellish and clarify. So maybe that line, I could use that S curve to help, again, relate that hair form to the perspective that we're trying to prove. So in other words, maybe instead of this flat line, maybe it goes like over and then swoops into that S curve. So that this first part of the curve, that's kind of what I'm referring to as helping or, being in harmony with this theme of curves that are kind of, on that perspective. So yeah, just sort of exchanging some of the blunt, simple lines of the underdrawing for a little bit more, nuanced pieces. And maybe as this goes up over that forehead, I come around with that far piece of hair. And then, what I'm trying to do is show an overlap. So the hair is not just on the head, but it's actually kind of wrapping around. So I'll try to clarify that if I can. Okay. And yeah, maybe I really made these lips a little bit too big. I don't know. I just, it all creates sort of different personalities, different expressions. So I'm just going to kind of shrink it a little. And yeah, the way I shaded this cylinder of the head super simply with this core shadow, just like I kind of did the sphere over here. Even our so-called sub-forms, or right, the forms within and on top of this greater form, that can be, they can be thought of or shaded in really simple ways too. So maybe these lips, I talked about kind of laying them in as like an M shape at first, but now that we're kind of onto the 3D aspect of things, if our light is generally coming from our right side over here, you could kind of go about shading this or thinking about it also as some kind of spherical form, maybe an oblong egg-like form or something. So again, the light is coming down, and then at some point the form is turning and going into shadow. So this is another little core shadow here, or form shadow, same thing. It's called a core shadow because based off of what we do with that reflected light, it creates this sort of core or a stripe. So yeah, you'll hear it called a core shadow. That sort of tends to imply that there is some reflected light, so that it is a core. And sometimes you'll just hear it called a form shadow, which is, I guess, maybe the broader term if the reflected light is really underplayed. So again, here we have that dark shirt and also some cast shadow, right? But even the volume of the lip here, I sort of see one in the reference. You could also kind of invent a little bit of a cast shadow. And again, maybe the rationale behind this cast shadow is it's creating a dark moment, so we get that reflected bounce light in there. And yeah, same thing with cast shadows, especially if we're inventing them. We've got to be thinking about the overall form of this big cylinder of the head. And I don't want to put something on here that's going to flatten it out. So maybe this curve right up here at the corner of the mouth, maybe that can go over, just like all of these things are kind of going over. And then yeah, it looks like at some point maybe there's like a little form shadow here on the lip, or the underside has a little bit of a form shadow as this, the pout of the lips sort of curves under. And yeah, I happen to be drawing with the Conte crayon directly right now. And yeah, I'm a big fan of super smudgy, dirty hands doing this. Not everyone is. You can also smudge with your chamois, although I don't know how much better that is, or a paper towel. And again, if anyone is doing this at any point now or in the future with just like a number 2 pencil, right? The same kind of thought process and concepts can be used, right? It's just maybe a little bit differently paced and maybe not as messy. So yeah, these little kind of cutouts for the eyes, similar thing going on. Yeah, stuff in perspective, like this foreshortened eye, kind of this diamond shape. Drawing things with straight lines is a great way to start. And then you can kind of round them off the more you work. And I'm going to just kind of really commit and push a little bit darker on the hair here. It's kind of cool, I don't know if I can get to this right now, but I love how the hair has this shiny material. Like you see this green light on it. Although, actually, in the moving reference here, yeah, it's a little bit keyed out, but anyways, to get this shiny feel, there might be a few specular, bright little dots and dashes of highlight. And that could be cool to put in to sort of, have a little bit of a different material going on than the rest of the paper mache. Maybe the lips will also be that sort of smooth. Maybe Noel got that from paint, like a different type of shinier, more gloss paint or something on the hair and the lips. it could be a good time to maybe customize, right, or add a little bit more nuance and character to this contour. So I began it as a really simple curve to get myself, in play. And the longer I look, the more I notice it's actually got this really cool, handmade bumpiness. So, maybe lay something in really generically, and then you can kind of do another pass on top where you're more observant of, the actual characteristics, and together you can kind of find a balance there of clarity and specificity, I guess. And yeah, sometimes there's these little nuances, sometimes I'm seeing on our puppeteer this little sliver of the shoulder. So it could be nice to just put in there to break up that space. And then we've got the arm. And the hand here. So I'm going to smudge in some charcoal here. And, I don't know, for now, just kind of erase out a little bit of a ghost of some of those, hopefully soon to be figures, or fingers. Maybe I can kind of paint in some of the shadows in between the fingers too. Really fun thing that I love about working with these mediums is the whole process of building it up and kind of knocking it back down. So that probably came up a little bit with our watercolor demo a few weeks or whatever ago. But yeah, having kind of the courage to just go and paper towel or chamois or with your hand and just kind of mash everything back is one of my favorite things about these materials. And yeah, it's not just a cool effect, but it actually, one thing it actually did that's really practical is it helped turn this bright white paper around the figure into more of a darker tone. And I think that's great because I do want at some point to get in here and start building up all the highlights. And, we sort of perceive everything relatively, whatever. I don't know what that means. We're constantly comparing things. So this will feel even brighter if it's next to something darker. Whereas if it's just sort of all floating on the bright white of the paper, it can be kind of hard to get that glow of the lights. So yeah, I'm using the gummy eraser, maybe even more efficient, right, is this sort of Staedtler or pink pearl eraser or whatever you might have. I literally found a box of art supplies or just pencils and erasers and things with a little label that my mom helped me make from the 2nd or 1st grade, or even before, like those transparent pencil boxes. And there's stuff that still totally works. But yeah, as I mentioned, sometimes those pink pearl erasers, they've hardened or something, and then you try to erase and it just stains the paper. And yeah, maybe that smudgy tone ends up being a perfect value / tone for the lips. We'll see. Try digging out. Yeah, and as you sort of, if you're doing this, or if you're, so I'm subtracting I'm pulling off pigment. But as I come up next to this core shadow edge that I've been working on, I don't want to erase, especially with such a bold eraser, all the way up to that edge, because that's going to make a hard edge. I like the gradation of it going from bright, middle, and then a little bit darker, and we're going to maybe push that a little bit wherever we want. But yeah, just remember the whole point of this form shadow, or the whole reason it's happening, is because the planes or the curvature of the form is gradually, turning out of the light. So we kind of really want that soft edge to remain. And yeah, it's, having said this is a painterly approach and we're working with mostly mass and value, it can be really fun and satisfying to come in here and just draw with line work on top of that. So yeah, maybe it's fun in some areas to have kind of a smoky, mysterious edge going on where it's not super defined. And then sometimes you just feel, the impulse to clarify and really let us feel, the boundary of an object. Maybe in here it's kind of cool to keep it a little bit more mysterious, where the mask meets the shirt. Or, it's not always for airy, obscure reasons, but maybe, really practical ones here, like the lip overlapping in front of this part of the mask, right? So that could be a reason to kind of bring some lines in there. Yeah, I think the gummy eraser is perfect for kind of twisting it out into a shape and then poking into this soft, charcoal and kind of pulling it a highlight. Yes, you can submit. That would be funny. Any and all artwork. Or documentation, I guess we can call it. The gallery will expand from beyond finished pieces into our art-making ephemera. So yeah, the idea with the highlight, in this case, I think, given the materials, given that strange shiny paint or whatever, we really see some actual highlights, which a highlight is technically the reflection of the light source into our eye. So a highlight actually can move, like based on, if we were to walk around and see our model from different angles, the highlight would consistently sort of follow. So yeah, there's a little bit of play, I guess you can have with the highlight. The way the light works itself, that's not so, that's a little bit more set. So, again, if we go back to our sphere here, assuming the light is kind of coming from this upper right section, the sphere is going to be, no matter what angle you're from, it's objectively sort of being illuminated here. But yeah, the that brightest specular, dot of real brilliant light, the highlight, is something that will move around based on where we are. So yeah, for each of these forms, I think a first pass is just kind of erasing out, in my case, the light, not necessarily the highlight, but just where the light is illuminating and kind of falling off from that point. So again, if these lips were simple kind of orbs or spheres of some sort, again, that upper right corner is where I think the light is mostly hitting. In terms of this whole head as a cylinder, it's probably right along this edge that it would be brightest. Yeah, this is Gaia's piano playing, which I'm a big fan of. It makes me feel more official, like I'm on a show, like a monthly art show. Kind of zigzagging with your smudging is another way to sort of, move that pigment around in a way that blends a little bit better. And yeah, for the nose here, again, I think putting shapes into words helps me sometimes, like an upside down triangle or a spade or an upside down heart shape. And then I guess another cool thing about the smudging is you get a little bit of your underdrawing, is often still there and visible, so it can kind of help serve as a little bit of a guide. And I can kind of punch in here. And yeah, so LC or POW have been awesome, and our Stream Elements bot, thank you bot, reminding us that, if anyone wants to send in any artwork, that'd be awesome. You can do it like during this session, and I can take a look like live on the stream and give feedback or pats on the back or whatever. Or you can kind of, send it afterwards, and we'll bake it into a little commemorative archive or gallery of, this session. Oh, it's really raining here. Cool. So yeah, just, one of a million more things that I think is worth mentioning with this kind of just, art theory or whatever. We're always balancing the visual elements. So, whether you're kind of making a landscape painting or a portrait of a papier-mâché mask or a portrait of a human head or a figure drawing or anything, in some sense you're dealing with composition, and how our eye kind of moves through a piece. So yeah, our eye tends to be drawn or attracted to contrasts. So that could be a contrast of value, in other words, light and dark. Could be a contrast of edges, like this hard edge. It could be more color, right? Although we're not really dealing with that so much, the way I'm working. It can also be shapes. So this large open area of the illuminated mask, and then this really tiny upside down heart shape of the nose, that there is a contrast of large simple shape and small intricate shape. And I think that little island of, this dark accent, that can kind of become a little bullseye or a target. Probably with, same with these eyes too. So yeah, I think it's a totally valid, legit way, fun way of working where you don't think about this and you just draw what you want to draw. But it can be interesting to think about the composition and just try to feel, where is your eye getting drawn to or pulled to as you make the work. For me, I'm like, these eyes and this nose, they're all like a little bit similar. They're all kind of that small, dark shape. So as I'm looking at my image in progress, I'm kind of feeling my eye wants to look at all of them at once. So there's not so much of flow there as I think there could be or I want to experiment with. So even though I sort of faithfully copied some of the tones that I see in here, this, real pitch dark and whatever, by doing that, I'm making such a small, intricate shape, which is already, gathering attention to itself, even more noticeable by its value contrast. So you can try, I always think of it like DJing, or playing around and manipulating these visual elements to kind of compensate and relate differently with one another. So if I wanted to make this nose hole, this is like now the TLDR version of that, you could make this a little bit lighter, I think, to have it sort of be subordinated to these other features, which I think, for my piece, are a little bit more important, or they're things that I think should take precedent. So yeah, and a lot of that, like the old masters and all the representational artwork and the Caravaggios and Rembrandts and everything I was mentioning earlier, I think a lot of the times, like, we can look at those works and think like, oh my god, like, they must have sat in front of their model for an eternity and just the patience to replicate everything they were seeing, like. But I think the more you kind of look into it, the more it becomes sort of apparent that even in works that have this feeling of, a devout, observational, whatever process behind them, there's so much design and play and improvisation and, kind of the artist's own interests and whatever personality kind of coming through based off of decisions that you're making. And yeah, that's sort of that idea of like drawing or painting as more of like an interpretation of reality rather than like a replication or, mimic of it. Thank you, Grunky-Deros. Grunky-Deros. Oh, was that the name that was your name that came up about that I thought was Crunkle Chips? Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, I think, sometimes the best thing and the hardest thing to do for whatever we're working on is taking a break and letting our eyes kind of reset so we can actually see, what we have and where we're looking. I always preach this, and then I continue to work without sitting up once for hours, which is really silly. And if I can just battle these forces within me to ignore logic and reason and experience, then I'll take a break in just a second here. And if I can't quell the impulse of sanity to take a break, then I'll just keep on drawing. But I'm pretty sure the conflict inside, the tides are turning, and reason, like a flashlight, is shining over to eliminate the bacterial infestation of stubbornness. But I'm not sure. It's back and forth. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's take a little break. And yeah, we'll take a look. So yeah, I'm gonna just grab some water, come back in a couple minutes, and keep going. Yeah, if anyone wants to send in anything, check the email too. We can kind of feature stuff. Maybe in the meantime. Whoops. Okay. Yeah, there we go. The computer got a little freezy there. I hope we're back. We can watch our puppet dance for a couple minutes. Thank you, Elsie. That's very kind. I can't wait till like, yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say the Zoom and Twitch merge, or we figure out a way to get both or something, so we can interact more during these. But I'm happy that they're helpful a little bit. Okay, I'll see you guys in a couple minutes. All right. This is super cool. Okay, hi Sybil and Pow and Elsie. Thank you guys so much for sending these in. These are so cool. Yeah, let's take a look. And I wonder what the model thinks too. Okay. That was thank you for the feedback, Queen. What do you let's see. Maybe we can do a little interview here with the model. Yeah, what do you think is what's going on visually and emotionally for you as you maybe you could stop dancing for a second. You could just yeah, okay. I don't think we can stop the dancing. But yeah, let's what do you think about these?
Well, I really pose. Let me look on the far left. Look at the use of tone and edges, and the gesture, drawing the whole figure. We were just talking, Chris, you were just talking about atmosphere and context, and not just drawing, whatever we're drawing, but alluding to a world greater, far more expansive beyond the limitations of just our foveal focus point. I love what the hands are doing. The hair, look at the hair. It looks as if Pao is using the eraser to subtly just dig into that dark graphic shape in the direction of almost strands of hair, and how they might wrap over the curvature of that domed forehead. Maybe I'm reading into it too much. And speaking of composition and the way her eye moves through the piece, I mean, look at that simple graphic yet elegant shape of the skirt and dress of the puppeteer. And then, in contrast with that flat graphic shape, we get the rendered light and dark, soft edge, details, line work of the face. You just feel your eye naturally gravitating up towards those focal points. Really cool. And another thing to notice, in fact, if you look behind me as I'm shaking my rump, hold on, Sybil, can we move your drawings a little bit out of the way? Yeah, thank you. Look right behind me. See that guy? See his face? That's Rembrandt. That's a self-portrait painted by Miley Land Art Center in 2014 or whatever. And Rembrandt, oh man, he loved to do this, setting up different compositional patterns of light and dark in the background. So, notice on Pao's behind for you guys, it's your left side, right? The background's getting darker, right next to the darkness of the hair, and that diminishes the contrast. So it's another way of telling the viewer, we don't care, don't look there. Instead, focus on some of the other areas. So sort of imagine going around with a remote control, a visual volume control, and adjusting where we want to look, where we want to end up. Really cool. And then let's take a look at Sybil's here. Even though Sybil hasn't filled in all of the... Hi, Sybil, by the way! Even though we haven't filled in, with tone, all of the skirt and dress yet, I love what's happening here. You get the sense of a figure in motion. They're sort of moving forward or something. Beautiful core shadow, some of that reflected light in there. The lips are constructed in such a way that I think really reflect volume. And we really get that sense of looking at the model from that three-quarter point of view. And La Pow Pow Pie says, Chris, I've been benefiting a lot from your message of focusing on areas that we want to draw attention to. Wow. Yeah, Chris, do you hear that?
Yeah. Well, that's really good to hear, Pow. Yeah, I took some classes. There's someone, if anyone wants to look, especially if you're in LA, but one of the strange, I don't know, perks or whatever realities with so much online tutelage and stuff these days. I don't know what I'm even saying. Okay, basically you can take classes with someone named Kevin Chen through a school called Concept Design Academy, CDA, in Pasadena, or in online India. And he teaches some figure drawing classes. One is called Head and Figure, and it's figure drawing, and yet he is like his bias or his point of view is coming from concept design and entertainment design. So he's like a designer for film, and he's doing background paintings and character designs. So while his figures, are beautiful in their own right, to him, it's all design practice. So it's just ways to, create something, manifest something with your hands, all that, but also to just practice the most efficient manners of, orchestrating an experience. And yeah, it's a really cool class. It was really fun, and you work with charcoal and kind of deal with head drawing and then move on to the whole figure. But yeah, again, it's just like Pal's doing a lot, and sort of what I'm showing with the background and stuff. It's about the figure in relation to an environment, even if it's subtle or just barely implied, and sort of building up a whole little world. But anyways, one of many really cool people you can learn from. Yeah, and Sybil. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. It's not really my place to talk about these. Queen, what do you think?
Well, the edges. Another thing about Sybil's that I really appreciate is if we just look at it, look at the edge quality of the shoulders and the handling of the shirt in comparison with some of the details in the face. Your eye, again, just seems to move right up to those facial features. So soft edge versus hard edge, lighter values versus darker values. All of those things being used. Very cool. I feel like Sybil, one food for thought thing is like that sliver of far hair, that little sideways triangle on the right side. That's an area where it's very dark. It's a symmetrical triangle shape. Wow. I'm just an art model, and I don't know, I seem to understand some basic terminology about this. Really cool. All this modeling over thousands of years has really rubbed off, and it's great. Anyways, all of those things stack on one another. Symmetrical shape, dark value, hard edge of that cheekbone or whatever. And I feel my eye getting drawn towards it. And again, who am I to say that's an issue? I'm not trying to critique. I'm merely offering a second set of eyes to say, do we want that to be the focus so much? Maybe you go in with a finger, a blending stump, a chamois, or a paper towel, or a tissue towel, or Kleenex, or a wet wipe, or collected mosquito wings, or maybe a foot, or maybe an old dried up peach, maybe a strange, dirty sink sponge, maybe a piece of crocodile tooth. And maybe you just apply a little bit of a wave on that and kind of knock some of it back into some softer edges like you have going on the shirt. I think that would help it feel spatially further away and attract a little less attention to itself. Anyways, great work. It's really coming down over here. I don't know if you guys can hear the rain. Okay, well, let's put that back over there. And yeah, Pal, my only constructive comment for this is maybe also you could smudge that core shadow on the base of the chin there and just have it go from that middle tone to the shadow just with one step in between to effectively soften that edge and imply a little bit of a curve. But just my 5 cents. And Elsie, look at that heart shape you drew. It looks like a rocket ship or a goldfish shooting off into the stars above, raining down bits of its liquid existence onto us. Unfortunately, those tears are turning into tears of sadness as we have this somber, moping, dejected sort of creature, and it's quite powerful. And I guess that creature's me. And I have to say, personality is a revolving door, and every day I wake up in the mirror and see someone else. Sometimes I barely recognize them. I recognize this drawing. You've drawn a mirror through which I can see myself, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Chris was going on about all that crap about drawing the background and environment and context. Sometimes you can just have a floating figure like this, and it reads so starkly. I really like that. I love that S-curve of the hair on the forehead. I think it's almost like the shape of the eyes do so much for the expression. Also, the way the head is tilted more vertically, right? The overall gesture of the shape is kind of this vertical statement, like bum. You know, the heads and the others are more articulated, leaning backwards a little bit, looking up or something. Just a different feeling. Anyways, wow. Well, if anyone out there has any other work that they want to send in, it's never too late unless we render the video, for next week or next month, and yours isn't in yet, and then we can't make it. But it's never too late to send it in. So just once more, kind of show